somebody's age, can also influence self-esteem, apart from the number of hours. Also, we can look at other factors like the employment status. Maybe this particular person has got is self-employed, and the kind of business this person is in can easily put it online, then people get to see what the person is dealing in. We can also consider another variable, for example, the relationship status. Maybe somebody's just engaged and madly in love, and they're posting their selfies, the photos and what. Look at the education level also. So all these factors can, in case we want to study them collectively, and we get to know that among these many factors, which one, among these many factors that we are having, which one influences somebody's self-esteem? Because we are saying that not necessarily the number of hours, but also there are other factors that we can consider. So for us to bring in multivariate analysis, so it implies that we need to understand collectively how each of these variables influence self-esteem. We need to understand how these variables affect each other, and then collectively, how do they influence self-esteem? And then in that, it implies that we have to run a multivariate analysis. Multivariate analysis, remember, it involves more than two variables. And we are saying that in this particular example, we first say that, well, you can look at the number of hours in relation to self-esteem and see whether there is a correlation, whether there is a relationship. You might find one, you might not find one. But also, given that it's a complex situation or concept, there could be other factors that we can consider to clearly give us a deep understanding of what really can influence somebody's self-esteem or a student's self-esteem. So the point is, when you consider each of these variables in relation to our dependent variable, which is self-esteem, we also see how do these variables other, and then in case we consider them as a whole, how do they influence the self-esteem? Then in that particular case, we are going to run what we call multivariate analysis. I'm going to pause a little bit, and I check in the chat, and I ask a question. From where we've reached so far, when do we run an multivariate analysis? You can post the answers in the chat, then I read them from what I've shared so far. When can you apply the multivariate analysis concept? Please type in the chat if you've gotten when you have more than two independent variables, more than two variables, when we have more than two factors, when dealing with more than many factors explaining a scenario. Great. Okay, wonderful. Okay. Maybe in case you've got, if you feel like there's something that might not be very clear, you can post in the Q&A and then you'll get the answers direct. But from what I'm seeing so far, I think we are still on the same page. Okay, let's continue. Jonathan has said that when dealing with multiple variables. Wonderful. We want to understand at the end of the day, what our objective we want to achieve today, that we all understand what multivariate analysis is all about, why is it important, what kind of statistical techniques that we are going to use when doing multivariate analysis, and when is it supposed to be applied. Okay, so more examples. Let's assume that you've got a weather data set, you know, and then you want to, maybe you want to deal with the predicting of weather patterns. Also still, and you've got different variables like temperature, rainfall, humidity, etc. So given that we've got more variables, what we want to do is that we want to collectively understand how these variables influence the weather patterns, and also how these variables correlate, or what is the relationship between these variables that we want to use to predict the weather patterns. So then we go ahead and considering the kind of analysis that the statistical technique that we want to use, and then we proceed with the analysis. Another example that you can consider, it's about the education, in case, let's assume that you've got the education performance data, and you want to investigate the factors that influence academic performance. We all know that when it comes to academic performance, there are many factors that really come into place. So maybe in case you're a student, one of the factors could be like, okay, the hours that you put in, for example, the study hours, they influence academic performance. But then it might not be the case because students are different. It might not be the case. There are some that, well, they really do not put in a lot of study hours, but still they perform very well. So looking at the different factors, the many factors, for example, like the test scores somebody can get within the different subjects, the attendance rate, if this person attends the lectures, what about the economic status of a student? All these factors collectively influence academic performance. So it implies that in this particular case, what we should look at, we want to see amongst these variables, how do they correlate with each other? Does the test score in mathematics has a relationship with the test score in math and also the language of arts? Okay. And then also, what about if we collectively look at these variables, how do they influence now academic performance? You might find that looking at these different variables and take the proportion of each influence on academic performance, it will give us a clear picture to understand like, oh, yes, given the complex of how academic performance is all about, then it implies that we can check the different levels of the variables that we have and say, well, this one influences more the academic performance compared to the other. And the moment we are looking at them collectively, then we are doing multivariate analysis. And I believe that most of us have really done multivariate analysis, all different topics or areas that cover the multivariate analysis, but maybe we are not aware that, oh yeah, that is what I was doing if it's a new idea or concept for you today. Okay, the last example is within, let's assume that you've got an agricultural data set and you want to check your the crop yield prediction. So let's assume that maybe we look at it as our dependent variable. There are many factors that can influence the crop yield. For example, the temperature, the rainfall, the fertilizer usage, the crop variety, and all these they play a big role when it comes to the crop yield. So looking at how these variables are related with each other and how they influence the crop yield also takes us back to understand that whatever we want to look at is under multivariate analysis. At the end of the day, for example, in this particular case, we want to understand how different factors together influence the yield of a particular crop, because different factors play different, they play differently, however much they are correlated. And we maybe it is due to the rainfall that we came up with the high yields or the fertilizer usage. And at the end of the day, looking at all these different factors that we are having, we are able to make recommendations and tell the farmers that, you know what, no, I think it was the high yield was because of the crop variety and fertilizer use, or it was just because of the temperature and the rains that we got, etc., as we are going to do, as we'll dive into the different methodologies that is going to enable us to see how the whole chapter is all about. Okay, so in summary, when it comes to multivariate analysis, there are different statistical techniques that are involved. And we want to see if there is a relationship between the multiple variables at the same time. You can relate back to the different examples that I've talked about. We are looking at everything collectively. Is there any relationship within the many variables that we are having at the same time? Can we draw any meaningful conclusion? Can we see any correlation? And how do we check the relationship between the many variables? Most of the time, number one, we look at how these variables interact with each other. And then number two, how they jointly influence the outcome variable. Like how I was explaining earlier, other than looking at each variable separately, like in the univariate or in the bivariate. And so, for example, in the different materials that we are going to be sending, you're going to be seeing different examples, and then you'll be able to tell that, yes, here I can be able to check variables if there is a relationship. At the back of your mind, please understand what are we trying to check, how variables interact with each other, not necessarily that, but how, in case they are considered jointly, how do they influence our outcome variable. We are going to get to certain examples. I saw in the chat whereby somebody was saying about two dependent variables. In case you're considering two dependent variables, what came at the back of my mind is like, well, this person maybe has knowledge about the analysis, that is the MANOVA. But all these details, we are going to see them as we journey on together in this particular week. Okay, so given that now at least we understand what multivariate analysis is all about, we've gotten examples. We know now when we can apply, but though we haven't yet gotten into the different examples or the statistical techniques, but now and we want to move on and look at something else, which is called multivariate techniques. You find that most of these statistical methods that we're going to cover within this particular week, they are categorized under two techniques. Number one, which is the dependence technique, which you can call a supervised technique in the AI language, or the interdependence techniques, which you can also refer to as the unsupervised technique, depending on the language that you want to use. So in all the different statistical methods that we are going to apply this week, they either belong to a dependency technique or an interdependence technique. With a dependency, please remember, if you want, you can also use supervised, or you can also use unsupervised. But most of the time, as we use these particular terms, we are trying to check, our main aim is to check the different relationships within the data set, depending on the data set that you want to work on. Okay, so let's move on and understand what does each mean. When we talk about the dependence technique or a supervised technique, what should come at the back of your mind? For example, in this particular case, for the word itself, it is dependency technique. So what should click at the back of your mind is like, oh yeah, maybe we are having something to do with the dependency of the variables. So with this particular technique, we use it when we have where we have one or some of the variables that are dependent on others. For example, the different examples I've just talked about, the last one on the crop yield, we saw that the crop yield depends on, for example, the temperature, the rainfall, the crop variety, etc. And also under here, we also look at the cause and the effect relationship between the variables. If you remember the first slide that we had, where we had our the independent variable when it was influencing the dependent variable. So there is a cause and effect relationship between the variables. The moment we see that, that is under a dependence technique. And we can also think at various examples. For example, you can say like, okay, somebody's height and age can influence his weight, whereby in this particular case, my weight is the dependent variable, and then height and age are the independent variables. So that is the dependency. The key message here, we want to check whether the variables are dependent on each other. Number two, is there any cause and effect relationship? And then you can pick as many examples as you can. As we digest through the whole of today, you can also check, okay, within my area of research, within my expertise, within the research that I want to do, well, okay, how are my variables dependent on each other? Could I see any causal relationship that could be within my variables or not? Okay, so that is the dependency technique. And we are going to see different statistical approaches under multivariate analysis that belong under the dependency or the supervised technique. Okay, now what about the interdependency technique? Unlike the dependency, in this particular case now, there is interdependency technique. What we want here is basically we want to explore the structure of the data set. Okay, or you want to check, you want to describe the patterns within your data set. The most important thing is that in this particular case, you just want to see the structural makeup of the data set. Let's take an example. Maybe you're looking at a person and then you say, okay, what is the structure of this particular person? It could be the person is tall. It could be the person is slender. It could be the person has an average weight. And then in case you have many of them, and for example, if you've got like maybe the father's, the parents' information, you could conclude and say like, okay, it could be just this person is tall, maybe because also the parents were tall. So in that particular case, you're drawing a pattern within the data set that you have. So here, we are not bothered about whether the variables are dependent on the other. So the variables are not dependent on the other. We are not looking at anything to do with causal relationship. What we are looking at is that we want to get meaning of the different collective variables that we have, such that at the end of the day, we are able to check if there is a pattern, if there is a trend, and then we can come up with a meaningful decision. And so here, the variables are not classified whether they are independent or dependent. The main aim here is we want to know the structure of the data set. What pattern lies within my data set? That is all that I want. Can I get a set of variables and then come up with something meaningful that I can recommend, like, well, that depending on this particular data set, this is what this is what I would recommend. Like the example I've just talked about, like here, because this person is tall, or the market is behaving this way, maybe because of the previous sales that were made. Okay, and then lastly on this, I just want to conclude on these techniques is that there are two main differences that actually you should remember from today when you're dealing with the multivariate techniques. The dependence technique, we look at how the variables affect each other. In that particular case, what is the cause, looking at the cause, and then if you have the cause, what is its effect? Whereas with the interdependence technique, it's about the patterns or the structure within the data set. So I'm going to pause here and then check in the chat. If you've gotten the difference between the two techniques, the dependency and then the interdependency. If not, I can throw more light. Okay, please, great. In case, please type yes if you can now tell the difference between the two techniques, the dependency technique and then the interdependency. If you have a technical question, you can still post it in the Q&A and we'll be glad to respond. All right. Okay, let's continue. Now that we've seen the different the two categorical techniques for the multivariate analysis. Now let's move into the different statistical techniques that can be applied under multivariate analysis. And then we'll be able to tell that, well, with this particular technique, then it belongs, either it is a dependence technique or an interdependency. And I believe that as we move on to get different examples, to do the work within R, then things are going to be they are going to be very good for us. Okay, these are the examples that I managed to get, but of course there are very many. So I'm going to give you mine, and then you're also going to give me more examples, and then we keep on building. So one of the common multivariate analysis technique that I believe most of us have used before, depending on your area, it is the multiple linear regression. Again, as we are going to continue further, we are going to see, okay, what is involved within multiple linear regression. Maybe some of us have been using it before, but we do not know that, wow, it was a multivariate analysis technique. Okay, so let me ask in the chat, basing on these particular examples, well, only that we've got the answers already. When we are talking about the multiple linear regression, which technique would you consider that? Is it a dependency, or does it belong under a dependency or an interdependency technique? The multiple linear regression method. Okay, how I saying dependency? It's a DT. Wow, that is great. Wonderful. Now let's move on. What about multiple logistic regression? We are changing now to multiple logistic regression. We want to know the technique we're going to do. Okay. I believe you all have your reasons as to why you're saying that it's a DT. Okay, that is great. Stephen is saying that it's interdependency. Really? Yeah. Somebody is saying not sure. Okay. What about the multivariate analysis of variancy? Is it a DT or an IT? We are changing now. Is it a DT or an IT? Okay. Majority are saying that it's a DT. Okay. Okay, great. Looking at that, MANOVA, it's a DT, it belongs under the dependency. Jacob is saying that I'm not sure. So, and then let's move on. What about factor analysis? We are going to go into details. I'm going to explain, but I just want to see if, so far from what we've discussed, if you've picked something. Okay, so I'm saying IT, that is the interdependence technique. I believe majority of you have gotten what it is. That's wonderful. Okay, we are changing. Let's check cluster analysis. Okay, where do you think, what technique shall we be considering? IT. Okay, and then lastly, the principal component analysis. And all these things we are going to, like Professor Susan mentioned earlier in the introductions, we are going to have a specific day for each such that we understand everything in details. And then we see how can you also apply such things within your work. All right, great. Thank you so much for being active. And so let's move on. Since now we can tell, looking at these different statistical methods under multivariate analysis, since now we can be able to group them, whether they belong to the IT or the DT category. Now, let's just briefly, I'm going to briefly go through each and then we continue. Okay? I'm just now saying what you've just told me. Like I mentioned, most of us have been looking at, for example, analyzing data, even within the other session that we had in May, where we are looking within the training, we covered regression, okay? And then we also had multiple linear regression. And we saw that when they were illustrating about multiple linear regression, we saw that in this particular case, we are considering more than 2 independent variables. Okay, so under the multiple linear regression, like most of you has mentioned, it falls under the dependence method, which is the supervised, if you want to use the artificial intelligence language. So in this particular case, during the part of the modeling, we want to check if each independent variable has a linear relationship with the dependent variable. And so most of the time we want to check that, well, looking at these particular factors, how are they likely to influence the dependent variable or our outcome variable? And in that particular case, we are able to predict in case, okay, what can happen in the future? How will the outcome variable be influenced? That is under the multiple linear regression. So under R, we can still go ahead and see having these many variables, but remember they have to be more than 2. And then how do they influence the what? The dependent variable. This is a simple example that I considered under the multiple regression in case you want to predict the crop growth. So here we have different variables, different independent variables, for example, rainfall, temperature, the amount of sunlight, and then the fertilizers that can be added within the cell. So considering all these variables collectively within the model, we are understand the proportion of the variance in the crop growth that is attributed to all these variables, the independent variables that we are considering. Okay, and still we can get into R and get to know how do among these independent that we are having, which one account for a big variance compared to the other. And then at the end of the day, still, like I mentioned, we give a meaningful way as well, a meaningful recommendation to those that might be in need of it. Okay, that was for the part of the multiple linear regression. The other one is the MANOVA, which is the multivariate analysis of variance. It is the extension of analysis of variance. Remember, with the analysis of variance, we are only looking at one dependent variable with other dependent variables. But in case we add now multivariate analysis of variance, the MANOVA, it implies that in this understand clearly when it comes to the dependent variable and then when it comes to the independent variables. In this particular case, when we are considering, when you want to measure the effect of the independent variables, it is done on 2 or more dependent variables. Somebody was giving an example in the chat of when we can use the multivariate analysis. So when it comes to the MANOVA, in case you have 2 or more dependent variables, okay, that you want to learn about and check how the multiple independent variables influence them, then we go ahead and do the multivariate analysis of variance. In short, that is the MANOVA. So things to note that are very key. That under the MANOVA, the independent variables are supposed to be categorical. And then the dependent variables have to be metric in nature, or they have to be numerical in nature. And of course, like the way we were looking at it during our previous training, also all these particular techniques have got assumptions that have to be met, but we are going to see that as we proceed ahead. In today's part that we want to look at is to clearly understand at the back of our mind what is the multivariate analysis all about. And then when we get to R, we'll be able to check our different assumptions and then also get to practically understand, now that I know what MANOVA is, how do I apply it? Okay. I've talked about that the independent variables are supposed to be categorical. We can have different examples. For example, somebody's employment status. Somebody could be employed full-time, employed part-time, unemployed, etc. And then for the dependent variables, they have to be numerical in nature. And we can have as many examples as we can. So at the end of the day, what we are looking at is that we look at different combinations of independent variables, looking at these combinations, and then we compare them to see how they differ in their effect on the dependent variables. I'm going to pause a little bit and ask in the chat if we can be able to tell what the key characteristics of a MANOVA in case you want to run that. Yes, and sometimes independent variables can be continuous variables. You're right, that is correct. We are saying that when it comes to the MANOVA, if you're looking at that, the dependent variables have to be numeric in nature. But the independent, they have to be categorical. Let me go back a little bit if it is not very clear. Mwanguzi is saying more than one independent variable. Yes, you can have more than one independent variable, and then check how, because within the dependent variables, within the different independent variables, you can have as many as you can, and then you group them. After having different combinations, and you go ahead and check you go ahead and compare them in terms of their effect when it comes to the dependent variables. So you can still do that. The outcome is continuous, and the independent variable are categories. Yes, you're right. Then another one is Ismail is saying that when you have many independent variables, having effect on dependent variables. Yes, you're right, but the independent variables have to be categorical and the dependent variables have to be numerical, or you can say continuous. So, example of numerical variables in our employment. No, this is not, employment is not a numerical variable. Employment is a categorical variable, because I said under the employment, somebody can be unemployed, self-employed, or part-time. Somebody's working on part-time. Okay? And then age is a continuous variable. Yes, age can be a continuous variable in case you've not grouped it. But in case you go ahead and group age, then it implies that it will turn into a categorical variable, etc. What you have to understand is that there are different examples that can follow under categorical, and then different examples that can follow under continuous, depending on your field. I believe by now we can be able to understand that. The fertilizer rate can be a numerical variable. That is in case that actually when it comes to numerical variables, they are quantitative. They are measured in nature. Maybe that that would bring it out more clearly. Okay. All right. When I'm pausing, I'm trying to read the comments that you're posting in the chat, and also to see that we are on the same page. Okay. I'm just going back briefly to pick the key points for those that are still wondering, when do we use the MANOVA? Like I mentioned earlier, right now we are not going to go into the assumptions, where in case like you have a data set to check whether the different assumptions are met. Okay, so, but they're just extensions from what we looked at last time. For example, the assumptions that follow under the simple linear regression. I mean, it's just an extension for the multiple linear regression. The assumptions for ANOVA, it's just then for the MANOVA, it's just the extension for the analysis of what? The analysis of variance. But now for ANOVA bit, there are key things that actually the most simple one to understand, that we are looking at multiple independent variables on two or more dependent variables. Okay, the dependent variables that you want to consider, they have to be quantitative, or call them numeric variables or continuous variables, and then the independent ones have to be categorical. I believe by now, I don't know if we are still on the same page, whether you can tell what a categorical variable is and what a numerical one is. This example, the employment status, it is a categorical variable because it has got, okay, the different levels that we are talking about. These are somebody who is employed on full-time, employed on part-time, or unemployed. Another example of a categorical variable could be the education level, because within the education level, we can look at different levels where you can group people. You can talk about marital status, somebody's gender, etc. When you talk about the numerical variables, where I'm saying they are quantitative in nature, they're numerical, talk about weight, talk about age, etc., etc. Okay, and our main aim is that we want to deduce, in case you compare these different independent variables, the combinations that you tend to have, how do they affect our independent variables? And of course, we want to do that collectively because we are under multivariate analysis. Before I move to the example, let me check in the chat and see if we are on the same page. Okay. All right. If you've got more questions, you can put them in the chat and then we can continue. Okay, great. Okay, we are set to go, and then we've shared the slides already. Explanation will support you to understand more things. All right, so another example, I would just want to give only one example and then the rest that you can do on your own. For example, we are saying that assuming that you want to understand or you want to study the effect of different teaching methods on student performance, this is what I want. And I just want to see whether this particular example that I want to consider, I can use a MANOVA. And my aim or the objective that I want to consider, that within these different teaching methods, do they have different effects on somebody's performance in multiple subjects? So our dependent variable in this particular case, we are considering scores in different subjects. For example, in mathematics, in science, in arts, etc. These are our independent variables. Just assume that you've got a data set. Within your data set, you've got a column that has got the scores in mathematics. You've got another column that has scores in science, and then you've got another column that has got different scores in arts. Okay, and you want to consider these scores as your dependent variables. We say that you have two or more. So in this particular case, we are having three dependent variables: the score in math, the score in science, and the score in arts. And the different methods, teaching methods that we are having, for example, we have the traditional method. With the traditional method, I mean that, an instructor goes to class with either a marker or a chalk, and then starts teaching. Or the other method could be, we can do online, like the way we are right now. We are studying online. Or we can do hybrid. With hybrid, you combine both the traditional as well as the online. I believe now we know that now what hybrid is all about. If you remember the COVID time, whereby we are doing a lot of hybrid learning, that's when it was really high. So with the hybrid, you can do both. Even right now, you can have an instructor and say, like, well, I'll teach you on Thursday, and then I'll come physically on Monday. So with our independent variable, it is categorical. And the variable that I'm considering is the teaching method. Which teaching method has three levels: the traditional, the online, and then the hybrid. And we want to understand, looking at these different teaching methods, the traditional, the online, and the hybrid, how we want to get to know whether there are different effects on the dependent variables, that is the student performance in the multiple subjects. Okay, all right. Now that I have all my example, I've got my objective, then how do I go about it? Maybe, you might say that, okay, I'm going to have different groups of students. I'm going to group them into three. And then within the three groups, they all get an experience of the three teaching methods. And at the end of that term, what you're going to do is that I'll check and give them different, I'll check their scores Maybe I'll record their scores within the math, within the science, and then the arts. And then after having all that, with their hypothesis of saying that there should be significant differences in the scores in math, science, and then the arts, depending on the teaching method, the teaching method used. So at the end of the day, you can recommend like, okay, maybe when it comes to mathematics, we can do traditional must be combined with online, because it brings a better, students are able to perform well. Or somebody can say like, no, when it comes to science, we can apply the 3 methods to get better results, because we are looking at the combination of the different methods within the different teaching methods, and see if there is a significant difference in the scores in math, in science, and then in arts. And so in that way, we can be able to make recommendations. And so given that, then we apply the MANOVA. Okay. All right. Now, all the previous examples that I've just shared, they belong under the dependency technique, which we all discussed. Now let's move on and talk about some few examples that are under the interdependency technique. Let me first check in the chat if we are on the same page. Okay. Okay. All right. So does you kindly post the questions in the Q&A, because we are many. The moment somebody sends a post, it is hard for me to track what has been said earlier. So put in the Q&A and then we'll answer immediately. All right, let's talk about briefly. We talked about another technique that we are going to consider within this particular week. I don't know whether we're going to look at it tomorrow on Wednesday. So let's understand what it's all about before we envision it into R, and how we are going to put it within when we want to do the data analysis. When it comes to fact analysis, it is an interdependence technique. Remember what we talked about within the interdependence technique is that we say that there is no correlation, there is no dependent or independent variables. Here, what we want to understand is the structure. We want to explore patterns. We want to just understand the makeup of our data. We want to seek understanding that in case I've got a group of these many variables, can I come up with a conclusion? Can I give a meaningful conclusion? So under fact analysis, it is an interdependency technique. Okay, and here we seek to reduce number of variables within the data set. You find that sometimes you can go to the field and collect too many variables. And at the end of the day, it might even be very difficult for you to draw up with patterns. So, and it can also cause about like when you have very many variables, they can also be susceptible to overfitting. And then you come up with a modeling error. And at the end of the day, you might you might find it hard to be able to generalize the same approach on the other data set, because you're not so certain of the predictions that you're gonna make. So when it comes to fact analysis, what you want to do, we look at these many variables and check and see, how can I reduce them, for example, variable. But also before reducing these variables, there is something that we have to put at the back of our mind, that these many variables, they have to be highly correlated. Okay, so we are going to draw our patterns within our data by looking at these variables that are highly correlated with each other. Okay, for example, within your data set, you have to detect and get to know, looking at these many sets of variables, which one are highly correlated with one another, and then later you can condense them into a single variable. And a lot of applications have been done when it comes to factor analysis, as we're going to see in different examples. For example, let's imagine that you've got a data set, okay, that it pertains, maybe it has got, for example, one person's income, education level, and then occupation. Okay, and looking at these three variables, someone's income is correlated with education level, and it's also correlated with this person's occupation. Okay, and then you might say like, well, I can group these three variables into one single factor. I can reduce them into one single factor, which I can call socioeconomic, the socioeconomic status. And then the socioeconomic status, it becomes my single variable, but when I'm explaining what is under the socioeconomic status, at the back of my mind, I know I've got these three variables that are highly correlated to each other, which is the person's income, education level, and then somebody's occupation. Let me check in the chat. Can somebody give me an example where I can I can be in position to reduce the many variables into a single factor? Somebody to share with us an example that I can look at and consider. For now, let's stop sending the Google Drive and the Google link. Can somebody give me an example that I can consider, assuming that you have a data set, it has got these very many variables, and then you can condense them into one factor. So Sasa is saying corruption. Okay, what is within the corruption? What different factors are you talking about? Okay, Rauf is saying the components of poverty. Anne is saying different cars under Toyota. All right, great. Students' grades, look at demographic aspects, food security, meningitis in children, institutional factors, socioeconomic factors, somebody's personality, the entrepreneurship behavior, environmental factors, employment status, etc. Depending on the different examples, somebody's giving somebody's lifestyle. That is what is when Wilfred is sharing. Social cultural factors. Yes, we can have different factors whereby we can condense them. Given the fact that these individual factors are highly correlated with the other, then we can condense them into a single factor. And still, it's interesting that before the week ends, at least we shall have a practical session in R when we are doing the application of factor analysis. So please be consistent such that by the end of the week, we can all run factor analysis and then apply it into the different areas of our work. Great. I'm going to stop there on that, given that at least we've gotten the concept. This was example 2. I'm not going to go through it, given that you've given me your personal examples and they're all right, but just get to know that these variables, they have to be strongly correlated with one another. And I mean, we can do correlation within R, and then we check, okay, among these many variables, how are they correlated? And then we get to know, and we're like, okay, looking at this variable, then I can put it under, for example, in this case, which is, okay. All right, etc. Oh. Okay, number 2, another example is cluster analysis. It is also an interdependence technique. We're also going to have a day where we are covering cluster analysis. Here, what we do is that we group similar items within a data set. They have to be similar in characteristics. That's what I mean by similar. Okay, then those that have got similar characteristics or similar items, we group them into what we call clusters. Okay, we can have different clusters within a data set, but provided they have got similar characteristics. And so within the grouping, when we are grouping them into clusters, we are able to draw patterns, and then the ones that are being grouped, they have to be similar to each other. And then, for example, that we can have, for example, let me say 2 clusters, and then within one cluster, whatever is involved in there, the items have to be the same. Okay, they have to be more similar to each other than the variables in the other clusters. So we have what we call the intra-cluster and then the inter-cluster distance. We are going to cover all the things within R. With the inter-cluster distance, we look at the distance within the data points within the same cluster. Okay, and this one should be small. With the inter-cluster distance, we look at the distance between the data points in the different clusters. For example, you can have like 4 clusters, and then we see how is the distance between these clusters different from each other. And this one should be really, can be really large. But at the end of the day, what we want to understand is to draw patterns. Remember here, it's about understanding the structure of our data set. After understanding the structure of our data set, then we can continue and do further analysis. This was an example that I thought that can help us understand an example within a cluster, like in case you're grouping students based on their study habits. Okay, your objective could be you want to identify groups of students with similar study habits for targeted academic support. And then you've got many variables that you want to consider. For example, hours spent studying per week, the number of groups that within the study session attended, use of online resources, the frequency of seeking help from the tutors. So for you to bring in your cluster analysis, you might say, depending on the data that you have or on what you've collected, you can group these students within different clusters. And depending on how you've grouped them, then you can come up with conclusion and say, maybe within the first group, I've got students who study extensively on their own and they rarely seek help. In group 2 or cluster 2, these are students who frequently participate in groups. They also use online materials. And then in the last group or the last cluster, you can say, well, these students, they minimally and also, but they often seek help from the tutors. And so, depending on this class, the way you've grouped them, you are able to come up with, for example, customized program and get to know, like, well, if this particular group of students, they mainly use online resources, then you're like, okay, can we support them with more materials? Can we support them with an environment that will be favorable to them, such that they are able to get the materials without any problem? etc. You can also do the same when it comes to, for example, segmented customers. Look, take an example in a grocery shop. You want to study, these different clusters of people that come to do the shopping. You can group and say maybe the pattern of those that have got low income, which goods they mostly buy, and then at the end of the day, you want to find out how can you support the different groups of people such that you can be able to draw patterns now and also support future predictions. Okay. These are more examples. I'm going to skip that. You'll read on your own. More multivariate techniques that you're likely to meet or you might use. There are many of them, but we cannot exhaust everything in this particular week. But you also have discriminant analysis, the structure equation modeling. All these ones here, they belong under the multivariate analysis. And given that we are just starting, after the training, you can explore more and see, okay, basing on this technique, how can I apply it in my research? From what we've discussed so far, at least we can be able to answer this particular question. what are the advantages of multivariate analysis? I'm going to leave that question over to you in your own free time. As you keep on digesting the materials that we are discussing, you can list down, why do we really need multivariate analysis? But at least for now, we should have at least 1 or 2 reasons from what we've talked about so far, why it is really necessary, especially when we want to understand complex scenarios within our data that we tend to collect on a daily basis. There are many objectives of multivariate analysis, but most of the time we want to do data reduction. Okay, we've just talked about facts analysis. You have many variables. It is hard for you to, it's hard for you even to get the pattern. So you can do data reduction, and then instead of the many variables, you can reduce them into one factor. And then in that particular case, it makes your data interpretation easier. Still, again, we want to sort and then group. We can group these particular variables. We've just talked about cluster analysis, where you can group objects with similar characteristics or with similar items together. And then still, also in this case, you draw patterns and the interpretation becomes easy. But sometimes you just want to investigate in case there is a dependency amongst these variables. We've talked about the dependency technique, whereby it deals with the cause and the effect relationship. So you want to investigate that. Also, you might be interested in finding out the prediction between the different variables. Remember, we check how these variables are correlated with each other, and then how collectively they influence the variable of interest. Also, you can do here we can look at other applications of the multivariate analysis, the different fields and the data set where you can apply multivariate analysis. And most of the examples that I've listed here, we've already talked about them. So what is the key message that we need to take home all today as we are opening up to see more techniques or learning into details what the things are? Multivariate analysis is all about finding patterns, trends, correlation between several variables simultaneously. And I'm saying that most of the time when you're applying multivariate analysis, especially when you're analyzing complex data sets, it just helps us to gain deep understanding of our data set, especially if we are to relate it with the real world scenarios. With the examples that we took, that sometimes the 2 variables are not enough to explain a given scenario, and you need to get other variables that can support us to get a deep understanding of why a certain outcome of interest is in the way it is. Also, I've mentioned there are only 2 multivariate techniques: the dependence technique, which talks about the causal and the effect relationship between the variables. Here we can have the dependent and the independent, the interdependency, which explores only the structure of the data set. We've looked at different multivariate techniques where it can be applied from what I've just mentioned, etc. Okay, so that was just an overview of what multivariate analysis is all about. So somebody's asking, are we going to also look at the PCA? Yes, we are going to look at that. Please make sure you attend till Friday. We are going to look at all these particular sessions. Okay. So I'm going to move on to something also that I think we can cover today, which is about visualization of multivariate data. And then after that, when we get to tomorrow, we start now looking at each technique one by one on a given day. And then at the end of, and by Friday, you'll get to know, okay, as far as my work is concerned, I think I'm going to use factor analysis. Given my field, I think I'm going to use PCA. Given this, I think I'm going to use cluster analysis, etc., etc. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. And kindly, let me hope you've got R. We are going to do the visualization in R. So with, I don't know if you've gotten the Google link. I've also pasted it again. Within that Google link, please click on it and create a folder on your computer. We'll keep depositing materials every day. All right. So we are going to use the R script, and then also we are going to use the visualization of multivariate analysis. I'm giving you a break to download the materials right now. Okay. 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 And somebody saying that can the link be shared with our emails? Please pick the link here. You just need to copy it to and copy it in anywhere in your Word document, and then you can always refer to it. For those that have it, you can share within your groups. Okay. So I'm going to talk about a little bit on visualization in multivariate data analysis, and then later we go into R. So I'm just going to use just a few minutes to explain the theory. All right. Okay. So we've done with the overview of multivariate analysis. Okay. Now we want to briefly go through and just have a little visualization of multivariate data. But still, we are going to have the part of visualization till the end of the week, because as we explain how the different techniques are working within the R, and then later we have to show, like, okay, how is it going to appear within on the visualization part, as well as interpreting the results. So here, what we want to look at is that most of the time, maybe I'm just asking that, what is the problem? Most of the time, we find that we are looking at traditional techniques. And so sometimes it is not easy for us to really extract useful information within multivariate data, as most of the time we do only the bivariate plots, whereby we're only looking at only the relationship between two. But now we can push further. We start with the univariate, the bivariate, and then we do the multiple plots. So in this particular case, we are able to check the correlations between the variables, but not the sample, but of our variables of interest. And then we can also be able to check the patterns, but visually, and then we come up with a conclusion, and we do further analysis within our data. So, like sometimes people say that a picture speaks volumes, okay? So it's the same case that we are having here, that visualization of multivariate data is very critical, especially if you want to understand complex relationships. What about the trends within my data, the patterns, the correlation, whatever is involved, especially if I'm using multiple variables. So I can use visualization to aid me to help me way. And then at the end of the day, I'm able to come up with a decision-making process. And so it is really a common and effective way on how you can be able to visualize your data under multivariate analysis. So most of the common and effective techniques that we can look at today, we have the scatter plot matrix, which is also the pair plot. Okay, we have what we call the parallel coordinate plot. We have the 3D scatter plot, the box plot, the heat map. We can do the principal component analysis. We can do the bubble plot. There are very many, of course, but I'm saying that the common one that usually that you're going to see in published papers or whatever that is being used, and maybe you've ever seen one within a publication and you're wondering like, how did they do it? Or you're interested to also use similar techniques and then apply them in your work. Okay, so throughout this part of the visualization of multivariate multivariate analysis, we are going to use the iris dataset. So first with the scatter plot, with the scatter plot matrix, or what I'm calling the pair plot. Here we are going to display different scatter points for every point of the variable within the dataset. And then we shall visualize the relationship and the correlations between multiple variables. We are going to consider the iris dataset. I think this is a very common dataset, which we can get from R. And then I'm going to talk more about it because before we do the visualization, we really have to understand what is this dataset is all about. But for now, I just got a snapshot of what happens in the iris dataset. We have 5 variables. We have the sepal length, the sepal width, the petal length, petal width, and then the species. Maybe just to, like we said last time, that you can even get more details in R to tell you more about what this dataset is all about, because it's already a dataset that can be used for demonstration or to understand what we really want to do. So what happened is that within this particular data set, they performed an experiment on 3 types of flowers, which in our data set is called the species. So the 3 types of flowers, we have the iris setosa. Hope that is the right pronunciation. Then we have the versicolor. Then we have the virginica. But on each flower, they were measuring the petal and then the sepal on each type of the species. So they were taking the length and then the width. That's why I'm saying we need to understand our data set very well, such that when it comes to visualization, it makes sense. Even just looking at the different species that we are having, you can quickly tell, like, okay, looking at the versicolor, looking at the virginica, what about I mean, even like you can just check, okay, how do the petals look like, or the sepals, etc. And then the kind of plot that we are going to look at in R, we are going to have something like this, but I want us to do it practically in R, and then I'll explain how each is all about. So what are the insights that I want us to pick when we are going to go ahead and draw a scatter plot matrix? Number 1, we want to identify relationships, okay? So we want to see, is there a linear or a nonlinear relationship between the pairs of variables? And then we also want to understand the distribution of each variable individually. We also want to detect, are there clusters or patterns that correspond to different species or categories? In this case, I'm going to use species because that is the data set that I want to use. And also, I can identify, are there any outliers or something, or there is an unusual data point within my data set that might need my attention if it might be not part of the data set that I'm considering. The other thing that want to understand is that when we are going to draw the scatter plot matrix in R, we need to load 2 libraries. the Gigari library, and then the ggplot2 library. Already the data set that we are going to use, it is the iris data set. And then for us to plot the scatter plot matrix, we'll have the ggpairs command. And then we'll color the species such that we are able to see the difference. And then also we after that we'll be able to we can also use the pairs function, and it can also give us similar result, or we can use the ggplot function. It can also give us similar results. So I'm going to pause here, and then we go to R. So now we are going to do the theory and then the R together simultaneously. So, but for now, we are going to do the scatter plot matrix or the paired matrix. I'm going to stop this. So let's kindly, I hope that for now, you've gotten folders on your desktop or on your document or in your downloads, whatever, where you want it to be. Is there an analysis on image data set? Mike, I don't know what you mean by that question, but you can be more clearer, and then we'll be happy to help you. Okay, so I'm going to share my R script. Okay, let me first put okay. We are going to do everything in R. So what I want you to do is that launch your R and be able to have 4 windows. Within the 4 windows, we are going to use the visualization.R script, which is one of the script within the day 1 materials. I'm going to check in the chat. I can't download the files. I can't do a PP presentation. Can you please type 1 in case you have the materials? If the Google Drive worked for you, can you type 1? Okay. All right. Then why is it that some people are saying they are not having the materials? Okay. Within that Google Drive, there is a folder which has got the different PowerPoints as well as the visualization R script. I'm going to paste again the Google Drive link, and then you can pick it and then click on it. You'll be able to see the materials that we are using today. If you have R already, which I'm believing that you do, please open the visualization.R script. And I want you to go ahead and install the ggari package and then the ggplot2 package. If you already have the ggplot2 package, we are going to just load it. But I think you don't have the ggari package. Okay. In case you open it and then you get, like, for example, a red, I think it's yellow, a yellow line up telling you that you need to install these packages, please just click yes, such that they are installed. So I'm giving you more time. We want to install the ggari package and then also the ggplot2 for those that do not have it. For now, those are the plots that we need. If they're installed, please go ahead and load them. And then we start from there. I have come here for the first time. I do. Okay. Somebody saying that I can't open the visualization script. You need R. If you don't have R on your computer, you'll not open it because it has got the R extension, and you can only open it with the R programming language. Still installing, please give us more time. Yes, I'm giving you more time so that we move on the same page. If there's now somebody's getting error in library, Gary, please first install. Let's use this command here. On the screen, it is line 9. Let's first install.packages. We first install it, and then later, after installing it, we'll load it. Where to get our studio? Okay. From the chats, I'm saying there's some people who are joining us for the first time, and this is an advanced training. The way we called it, advanced statistical training. I would kindly refer you to our materials that we used in the previous training, and then you'll be able to get all this particular information. What is R studio? What is the difference between the two? How do we install? Because we are using an open software. R is an open software. You don't need to buy it. You just need to download it from internet. So the homework that we are giving you today, for those that do not have R, you're going to check the materials that we have online. If you check on Ruforum website, Ruforum YouTube, sorry, it has got all the trainings that we did, and they are all recorded. So you can go through, especially the one of day one. It will support you to see what R is, how do we use R, how do you download and then install it on your computer. I would kindly ask you that you can follow a little bit. I'm going to be a little slow, and you see what we're doing because we are just shifting similar concepts. Okay. Is there somebody who has succeeded in installing these two packages and then loading them? At least let me see if there are some people. Still installing, yes. Okay. When you install, please load them. Yes, ggplot first, great. Now go into the ggallery, install and load. Yes, loaded. ggplot2 installed, great. I want more people. It is impossible to install packages without the software. But yeah, it is. Then why are you going to install the packages? You need the software first, and then you install the packages. Maybe briefly, I'm just going to just talk about it. For those that do not have R, just go to Google and type in download R, and then follow the prompts. It won't take you a very long time. After downloading R, still type in again in the Google link, download R Studio, and then you follow the steps. You're not going to be in position to install any package unless if you have the software installed on the computer. In case you're having only one window, it implies that you're only running R. You need to launch R Studio, which is embedded or where R is integrated. Okay? Please, within your search button, type in R Studio. The moment it pops up, click on it, and then you should be in position to give you the 4 windows that you're seeing at my end. Okay. You can open the visualization file, yes. It takes time to download and install the R software. It doesn't take a lot of time, provided you have internet. That is all that you need. You just need to have a stable internet. Like within 5 minutes, it should be done. Having both, remember you download R and then R Studio. After downloading, launch R. We are going to use these two packages, which you have to install first. After installing them, then you load. Done installing and downloading. Okay. That is great. So now, if you're done with the downloading and installing, then launch R Studio. Okay, Ben is saying that installed. That is good. It is already done in my case, Alphonse. I'm glad to hear that it's good at your end. Can I get more feedback? I want more feedback. Done. Alemo, thank you. Okay. Both loaded and installed and loaded. Give done. R is case sensitive. Make sure if it is capital G, it has to be capital G. If they're asking you for R tools, go ahead and download R tools. Remember to read the different comments that you get, because as you read them, they're going to help you to get a solution. Okay, I'm pausing for a minute and then we continue. Okay. I think I've given you some little time. So in case you have a challenge, post it in the Q&A, and then you will be directed from there. I have R. What is not happening? Okay, can you type 2 if you've managed to install and loaded the packages, the 2 packages? Mine is line 12 and then 13. Okay, great. I think now we've got a big number. We can move on. For those that have not installed R, please don't get discouraged. Just follow through, but make sure by the time you join us tomorrow, you have everything and you've gone through, you've downloaded, you've installed, as well as having gone through what we are looking at right now. All right. If they're asking you of R tools, please install them. Go ahead and install R tools. Just type on go in your Google, in Google, and then type in download R tools and then follow the prompts. You'll have it installed on your computer and you don't have that error again. All right, so let's continue. So we want to look at visualization of multivariate data in R. How is it done? I said we have many examples or many types of the common and effective methods that we can use. So we are going to try to go through one by one, and also you can also check and see how can it be applied to my work. With R, like we mentioned, you need to have the associated package that is going to help you to come up with the objective that you want to achieve. So within multivariate analysis, in case you want to do visualization, one of the packages that you want to consider, which is the GigaRay package, this one has got the pairs function, which you're going to see as we move on. Okay, because we are looking ahead to create the scatter plot matrix, or call it a pairs plot. And I mentioned that we are going to use the iris dataset. So we need to understand this dataset very well, and then later go ahead and see how do we interpret the results that we get. So what I'm going to do, I'm running line 12, I'm loading my libraries because I want to. So I click line number 12, I run it. Please do the same at your end, okay? And I also run the line 13, okay? Remember what we said, that not all the reds that you see in your console are errors. So you can also read them and get to know, okay, maybe there is some information that I'm being told that I need to understand. All right, so I'm continuing. Remember, we talked about our help. In case you have something that you're not so sure about, you can also use the help command to support you get more information or details on what you want to look at. It could be a function that you're not so sure about. It could be a data set that you want more details about, etc. All right. So within the iris data set, which I mentioned that it's inbuilt in R, these are many of the data sets that we can consider, and this data contains 4 measurements for 150 flowers. Okay. Okay. Now, from what I've mentioned, remember we said we can use the help. I'm talking about the iris data set. So I can use the help command to get more details, just to first understand what is it all about, even before I move into the analysis. When you check in your help window, after I've put in a new command, which is help, and I've put inside help, I've put the name of the data set. When I run line 15, the help window opens, and it gives me, it is called the Edgar Anderson's iris data. It gives you the description, okay, that This was the data set gives you the measurements in centimeters of the variables, sepal length and width, and then petal length and width, respectively. For 50 flowers, for each of 3 species of iris, which we talked about the species, Vascola, and then Virginica. So in other words, these were our observations are flowers. Like the way you move out to collect data, and then your observations could be students. So in this particular case, the data set that we are using, they were taking different measurements on 3 different species, which are flowers in our particular case. And on each type of species,
Yeah, Dr. Helen, your voice has gone off.
Okay, I'm back. Thank you. Okay. So within the help window, you can get as more details as you want. We have, apart from the description, we have the usage. We are also given the format. So they are telling us that iris is a data frame with 150 cases, the rows, okay, all our observations, and then 5 variables. These are the columns. They're naming us the variables. We have the sepal length. Those are the 5 variables. So we are going to use and then they're telling us also the source where you can pick the data sets. And of course, more details, and then the references. You can do some summary, etc., etc. So that is the data set I'm talking about that we're going to use. When you check in the R script, remember in our first training, we said everything after slash, they're just comments, and they're just to help you to understand, to give you just more details. Maybe, for example, you might close R for a week and you need to do some little revision. So whatever greens that you're seeing in this script, those are just comments that to support you to understand what we are looking at. Okay, so within R, if you want to load an inbuilt data set, this is what we call a data command. Okay, I'm typing it at line 21. You type data, and then within the bracket, in case you know the name of the data set, you put it there. But in case you leave it open and run line 21, then it implies that it's going to bring for you the different data sets that are within R. But here, at least we know that the name of the data set, it is iris. Okay, so inside my bracket, I type the name of the data set, which is iris. And that is line 22. So I'm going to run line 22. Okay, if I run line 22, remember this time around, I've not imported data, like you going into session, then set working directory, do all that. We are not doing that. We are using an inbuilt data set. And for you to tell that, yes, what I've done is okay, look in your environment window. It is now showing that the name of the data set, it is showing 150 observations of 5 variables. Can I check in the chat? Have you succeeded seeing your data in R? And even you can check, you can click view, or you can click the Excel icon. So this is how my data set looks like. Okay, I've got, they measured on the Setosa, they measured the sepal length, the width, and then the petal length, and then the petal width. If you remember the picture that I showed you within our PowerPoints, such that you're able to understand these different measurements that they took on a given flower. Okay, let me check in the chat. If you've managed to see your data set. Can we have the learning materials? Kindly get the learning materials from the Google Drive. Okay. I want to see more yeses if you've been able to load, to see your data sets loaded in the environment, and then we continue. Okay. Let's go on. Somebody saying what? Okay. All right, let's continue. So this is what I'm having. I've got 5 variables, all right? And then 150 observations. From the help command, from the help window, they're telling me they got 50 flowers for each of the 3 species of iris. All right, I'm going back to my R script. I mean, first things first, you remember, you can type, you can check that, you can use head, and then if you type head iris, you just see only the first 5 columns. Sorry, the first 5 rows. But in case you put in, for example, if you put 6, then you're going to see the first 6 rows. If I run line 25 at my end, I'm seeing, remember, we've just seen the whole data set. But now, if I say head iris 6, it is only giving me the first 6 rows. Okay, I can also use the tail command to see the last rows. And in this particular case, I want only 5 rows. In case I run line 26, it is going to give me from 146 to 150. And then it also gives me the respective values in there. Sometimes, like we say, when you're doing data analysis, you can do, some descriptive a little bit and get to know how your data behaves or the description of your data. I run line 27 to give me the summary of the iris data set. If I run line 27, okay, please tell me if I'm fast. This is what I'm getting. I'm just doing a descriptive analysis, all which you can also say univariate analysis. I'm just looking at each variable. I'm seeing that the sepal length, I'm being given the minimum and then the maximum. I'm seeing also the mean. When I come to the width, it is giving me the minimum of 2, the maximum of 4. That is the width of what was measured, the sepal width, the petal length, and then the petal width. I'm also seeing that the different species, I've got the 3 of them. I've got 50 for Setosa, Versicolor, they're 50, and Virginica, they're 50. This line here, when you come to line 29, I just wanted to get the mean for each variable. But I mean, I've already seen them here. I mean, because you can see the mean for that for the sepal length, the mean for the sepal width, the petal length is this one, etc. So that is what line 29 does. In case you just want to look at it separately without having the other without having the other details. So I can run that line, but what it does, it just gives me the mean for each variable within the data set. So my command is mean, and then inside I put the name of the data set, iris, then I put a $sign, and then I call the variable name that I'm interested in. I put everything on one line, separating them with the semicolons, and I'm able to come up with the result. So we are saying that, maybe let me check in the chart if we are on the same page up to line 29. Are we on the same page, or some people are lost? Okay, great. In case you're lost, please type the question in the Q&A, and then you can be helped. Okay, let's continue. So, also, given that we are dealing with 3 species, what we can do, we did some time back, we talked about data manipulation, that you can have, for example, I've got 150 observations, and then what I can do, I can separate and also get to know more details about each particular species. Species, and also get to know, because the previous analysis, we are looking at everything as a whole. What about when I just want to consider one species in this particular case, which is Setosa? I use the subset command. Okay, I'm using the subset command. I can say I'm using the subset command. Okay, inside the subset command, I start with the name of the data set. After putting the name of the data set, I put comma, I call what variable do I want to subset. In this particular case, which is the species, and I say I put double equals, and then Setosa, I put it in what? In double quotes. So, and then I just use the same name just as my object name, but I can put anything. All right. Since I'm creating a new data set, it's like I'm removing one species from the main data set. I'm just still using the same knowledge we covered in the earlier training. So in case I run that, I'm able to see that I've created a new data set which only has the Setosa observations. Even if when you go and click on the Excel icon, now whatever that you're going to see, whatever that you're going to view, it is only going to be for one type of species. Okay, and there have to be 50 of them. You can check through slowly, and then you click and see how your data looks like. I did this because I want to be very clear. I want to understand, to get more details of how my data is, and then later it will support me to know what technique am I going to use. And also you have to remember that in this particular case, since the measurements were done on the same plant, okay, the 4 measurements were done on the same plant, something should have clicked already, like, like these different parts are correlated. Okay, but we're going to go into more details when we get there. Okay. And after that, I can also run the summary. This time around, and I get to see that, okay, looking at only the Setosa, when it comes to the sepal length, its minimum is 4.3, and then the maximum is 5.8. I go ahead, check the mean. If you check the mean now, this time around the mean has reduced compared to the one that was general, covering all the different types. Okay, And when you come to now the species part, it is giving you only 50 and the rest are what? Are not there. I do the same for the versicolor, just to still understand. There's nothing really here, but just to have a feel of my variables, I do the same. And also with this one, I run the summary statistics. Because at the end of the day, I might be interested in understanding of these three species, which one has got maybe a longer sepal length or a wider sepal width, or a petal length or a petal width. That is the instance, because with this a lot of information, you can easily learn a lot of things. I do the same for the last one, which is the Virginica. I run that. I also do the what? I also do the summary, and I'm seeing my output that I'm getting. Okay, so what we are going to do, I'm just going to explain a little bit, because at the end of the day, this simple descriptive that we are seeing, it is going to help us to be explanation when we come to, when we get to the scatter plot matrix or the plot matrix. As you're seeing the comments up here on line 36 on the Satosa, I have the mean, okay, the mean of each variable, the mean of the sepal length, the mean of the sepal width, of the petal length, and then the petal width. I also went ahead to pick the minimum and the maximum value for each, okay? The minimum sepal length for the Setosa is 4.3 and the maximum is 5.8. I did the same for the other variables. Whatever that you're seeing here, it's the same thing. I can see that this one, the mean is 5.9, and then the mean for the sepal length for Virginica is 6.588. And then I can say, okay, the average mean of the other species is more compared to the versicolor and then the Satosa. So you can also go ahead and see, what about the moment it comes to the, when it comes to the length? Okay, which kind of a species has a longer sepal length or petal length, and then which one has, for example, a wider or a narrower sepal width or petal width. That is why we are running out these particular variables to give us a feel on how they look like. Okay, so let's continue. Now, we are going to, remember we are doing visualization. We are going to start plotting. And most of the time, I want us to do a simple scatter plot, whereby we are considering the petal length and then the petal width. Remember, this is just a data set for learning purposes, but you can also just how can I do some visualization of the different data, of the different variables that I have at my end? Okay, so here with the simple scatter plot, remember with the scatter plot, we are going to, it is just in 2 dimensions. We have the x-axis and then the y-axis. In this particular case, I'm going to only consider the petal length versus the petal width, and then see and check and see, is there any relationship? How do I do that? I'm going to use the plot command. Of course, there are many commands or functions that we can use, but for now, I want to use the plot command. Okay, and then in case you don't remember how to use the plot command, you can, okay, you can use question mark plot, and then you run within the help window. They will show you how to do that. But most of the time with the plot, you start with inside your, inside the plot function, you start with the x variable, then the y variable. You can go ahead and even do some labelings if in case you want. For example, here inside the plot command, I've got this My x-axis, I'm going to put, I'm saying that go to the iris data set, pick for me the petal length. And then my y, go to the iris data set, the $sign, I'm picking the petal width, all right? And then this other argument, the main, one that is going to give me the title that I want to use. Let me hope that whatever I'm talking about is clear, but I'm going to pause and then ask questions. So in case I run this particular line, remember I'm moving step by step such that the moment you get to the cluster plot matrix, okay, it is easy for you to add up whatever that we'll be discussing from the beginning, and then it will be easy for you to explain. So if I run this particular line, remember, run a plot. Any figure that you're going to get, you have to see it in your plot window. So let me pause and ask in the chat if you've been able to plot. Remember, we are now on the advanced part. We had most of these things prior, but we are just like building different blocks to make our work better. So I want to check in the chat and see if you've managed to have this plot where we are having the petal length versus the petal width. Within my plot, I start with the X variable, then the Y variable. The main argument is the one that gives me the title. Okay, let me check. Okay. I'm seeing many yeses, which is okay. Okay. Now let me ask a question. Looking at our plot, what possible explanation would you give? You can type in the chat. What possible explanation would you give? Given from what you're seeing, can you give any meaning? Or no, it is complicated. You cannot tell what is happening. Okay. I'm seeing that positive correlation between the two variables. Okay. There is a linear relationship. Positive, difficult to isolate. Okay, somebody said that it is difficult to isolate the species. That is something great. We are going to see that in the next step. I'm glad that you've pointed it out. There is a positive correlation between the petal length and the petal width. Okay, linear relationship, then the positive correlation. Those are the different answers that I'm seeing. Wonderful. So with these two variables, where we remember on the different species, all right, they went ahead to do measurements for both the petal length and width, as well as the sepal length and now that, yes, some of you are saying that there's a positive relationship, there's a direct relationship between the two variables, the petal width and then the petal length. Remember, when we say there is a positive one, it implies that if I put it another way, an increase in the petal length will lead to an increase in the petal width, because you're saying that there is a positive what? Relationship. But at some time, somebody is saying that, well, I'm seeing the different observations that are being plotted, but it is hard for me to understand they are for which particular species. We're going to answer that question in the following command that I'm going to run. Okay, please pay attention. So I want to create a scatter plot again, okay, like the one that you're seeing. When this time around, because I'm only seeing zeros and what, but when this time around, I'm able to understand whether I'm able to tell the different species that are being plotted. Okay, the different observations of the species. So, and then also I'll create a regression line. for me to be very sure that you are saying that, well, if there is a positive relationship. Okay. And I'm going to use the ggplot command. Okay. This is the command that I'm going to use. There are many ways on how to skin a cat. You can use the plot command, you can use the ggplot command, you can use the pairs command, depending on what you're interested in. So, inside the ggplot command, in case you want to see the different arguments or more help about this, we go to the what? We go to the help window, and then you type question mark, ggplot, and you take more details. That will help you to support you to really understand more. All right, so inside the ggplot, number one, I put my data set, the different arguments that I'm doing. I put my data set. The moment you understand the arguments, we said R is reproducible. You can replicate it to another project, provided like, okay, this is just the name of the data set, and then in your new data set, you can be able to say like, okay, no, let me put this particular name. All right? And then I'm mapping on my x-axis, I'm putting the petal length, like how I mentioned earlier, and then my y-axis, I'm considering the petal width. I'm bringing in another argument, which is color. I'm telling R, color for me the different, color for me the species column, which has got the setosa, versicolor, and then the virginca. All right, so I say color equal to this. All right, so now I'm setting up the ground. And then after that, it's like I'm building. I'm telling R, do not stop there. I'm adding a scatter plot. So I bring another function, which is the gemo points, implying that it's geometry points. So we only take the GEOM underscore points, implying that I want the observations that I want to see they have to be in point form. All right. So, and then what size do I want? Let them be of size 2. My points, let them have size 2. And then alpha equal to 0.7. With the alpha equal to 0.7, it's not about testing for, it's not about hypothesis testing. Okay, all right. The AES, that is aesthetics, that it's like we are laying a ground on how we are going to do our mapping. All right, let's assume that you want to construct a house and you're laying a foundation. So within this particular foundation, I'm saying that put for me, let my X variable be the petal length and let my Y variable be the petal width. But don't stop on that. Go ahead and separate them by coloring the species such that I'm able to see them very well, how they are separated from each other. That is what the AES does, aesthetics. All right. Now, I would moved on to line number 2. I'm on 60. So line 60 supports to have a scatter plot. But I'm using geometry point. All right. We can change it to something different. But for now, and I'm saying that the points that I want to use, let them be of size 2. And then alpha, it is about having these points to be more transparent. I want to see them, I want to create a better visualization whereby even if there is an overlap, I'm able to see it. So you can change it from 0.7 to 0.5 to 0.9, depending on the degree of visualization that you want to see. But you just want to make your work looks more clearer. So that is the scatter plot. When I move to line 69, I'm also saying that, okay, I'm using the GEMO smooth. This function here supports me to add a regression line. So inside this function, the method I want is LM, linear model. SE, that is a standard error equal to false. I'm telling R that do not display the confidence intervals. That is why I say standard error equal to false. I don't want to see any confidence interval bound displayed. And then the line type, I'm saying that let it be dashed 1 and of size 1. So line 61, it's about the regression line. All right? And then when you come to line 60, it's about labels. Within the labels, I'm saying that give me a title. The title equals what? I'm saying that label it as scatter plot of petal length and petal width with regression line, because I'm saying I want to add a regression line. On the x-axis, label petal length. On the y-axis, label petal width. This time around, you R to label for you by default. You're commanding it to label for you what you want. And then the theme minimal, it also supports you to make your visualization more clear. All right, so I'm going to run everything. So I'm running from line 59 to 65. I can start from here. I can just put the cursor at the end and then do the running. Before I run, let me check in the chat if we're on the same page with that particular line. If you have technical questions, post them in the chat. Wow, that's great. Okay. So it implies that, okay, that yes, but too long. Okay. In case it is long, you can break it into, okay, somebody saying that yes, it is okay, but it's long. In case the command is long, what you can do, it is very easy. You can break it because I just put a plus here. You can remove the plus and first run the what? First run line 59. And then now go ahead and run line 60 on its own. I can still remove this plus because it's like I'm just adding on the previous one on line 59 after my ggplot, like after running it, add for me a scatter plot. Because remember I said we are laying a foundation, okay, like you're building a house. Then after the scatter plot, don't stop there. Add for me a regression line. And then I'm like, no, after the regression line, don't stop there. Add for me these particular labels. Okay, somebody's asking, what about the geosmooth? This particular function, what it is helping us is to have a regression line plotted in our what? In our scatter plot. That is the main point. Like I mentioned for the GEMO point, like the way you're plotting a scatter plot, there are going to be points, right? That is the geometry that we are telling R to give us. But you've told it that no, let them be of size 2. And then you can also say, let them be of size 4 or whatever size that you want. Okay, now with the geometry, the GEMO smooth, it is inside this command where we are telling R that I want a regression line. Okay, that's why inside there is method which is equal to LM, that is a linear model. I'm putting different arguments. In case you're saying that you can reduce these arguments or you can leave them the way they are, but they're just supporting us to come up with a better picture of what we want to see, and then such that we are able to explain what we want more easily. All right, okay. I've talked about, so that is what the geometry smooth does, or it is geomorph. We just want to create a regression line. And then you also put the characteristics of the line that you want, that I want it to be dashed, I want it to be of size 1, and I don't R to display confidence intervals. So I write SE equal to false. Remember the help command. You can also type and say question mark, okay, and you type geom smooth, okay. After that, you can run it. And then after running, you come here within the help window. It is going to give you more details. What arguments do you expect inside? Okay, because when you see it here, there are many arguments that you can apply, but I only pick what I want. For example, I picked the method that I want to use, a linear method. That is all that I want. In case you want to see the formula being used, you can put like formula equal to true. Okay, I said the method, I want the linear model. The standard error, in this particular case, by default, they are putting it to be true. But me, I'm telling R, no, it is false. Don't display anything when it comes to the confidence interval, that particular line. If you move further, there are other arguments that you as an individual, you can learn in your own free time. The different characteristics, again, the line type, let it be dashed etc. And then I say that, no, after that, I'm still adding something else. Put for me these labels. But in case you see that it is a long command, you can break it without putting the pluses. I only put the pluses just like to keep on building, to give me something better. By the end of the day, even if you run line per line, you're gonna come up with the same thing. Let me hope that is clear. The one who was complaining that it was a long one, I just put pluses. That's why it is becoming long. Yes, LM is linear model. You're right. It is LM, not 1M. LM, not 1 million. Okay. All right. So I'm going to run everything at a go. If I run whatever that I want, I expect to see something in the plot window. Okay. So let me, I'm going to zoom out. Let me stop sharing, and then I share the figure that we've come up with, and you're the ones going to give me the explanation. Can you see what I've shared? Okay, great. Okay, so this is how my plot looks like. Can anybody tell me, we are saying whatever we said after the building, we said that go to my iris dataset. On my x-axis, put for me the petal length, which you're seeing. On my y-axis, that is the AES you're asking. We are laying a foundation. Okay, then maybe I'm going to go back and run the first bit such that it's more clear. And then on the my y, you give me the petal width. Somebody was complaining that, yes, I've seen that you've done the plotting, but I cannot tell the different species. So with this particular command, we are able to see. When you look at our key, remember we said I want a dashed line, put for be of size 2, the different points that we opted for. So we are told that with the Setosa, which has the red points, you can separate by species, then the green, that is Vascola, and then the Virginica is the blue one. So So I want you to, at least maybe you share with me your thoughts about this particular plot. I know we already said that, oh yeah, there is a positive relationship, okay? But by doing like this, I'm able to see, okay, of the three species, which one has a stronger than the other, etc. Now, let me stop there and hear from you. Any comments from our plot? You can type in the chat, then I'll read. Okay, the petal length and width are more linely associated in versicolor than other species. Great. Can outliers. The correlation is strong in the red color. Certosa species are more correlated, followed by versicolor and the virginica. Please make sure you look at the figure very well. And then you tell me which one is more correlated than the other, which one has a strong correlation. We already know that there is a positive relationship, all right? Okay. Varies with the species diversity. Versicolor have moderate positive correlation than Certosa and virginica. That is great. Strong relationship between petal width and petal length in the, okay. Green color has stronger than others. They all have positive correlation, but strong in the virginica. Wonderful. I'm going to stop there since you're giving me the right answers. Okay, green is more correlated, is higher. Okay, let me ask, which one has got low values in terms of petal width? Which one has low values of petal width? I think green and blue are correlated. Yes, you're right. Okay. James, you're saying there, given that now you've given me the answers. All right. Let me share again. Thank you for the answers. That is great. So we are moving. I'm happy we're on the same page. I'm going to, now that you know what we are doing, I'm going to skip the code. Okay, maybe the thing I wanted to say that about the AES, I want to only copy this line, and then I copy it here. Remember, I talked about before building the foundation that I want to do. In case I only run that line without adding, what is going to happen? I want somebody to get the difference. Okay. Are you seeing what I was talking about? I'm laying my foundation. Okay. Where am I? I'm having my foundation where I'm having the petal length on my x-axis and then the petal width on my y-axis. And then as I keep building, because I've not put the scatter plot yet, okay? Because the moment I said plus, I'm like, on this foundation that I've put first, put for me now a scatter plot. And then after the scatter plot, no, the geometric smooth, put for me a regression line. And then after that, on top of that, go ahead and do, and then label for me whatever that I want. I'm hoping that is now clear for somebody who was asking, what does the aesthetics does, the AES, just to give us the mapping structure where we are going now to paste all other information that we want. Okay. So I'm going to leave you with line. You're going to go through the same code from line 70 to 76, if you've gotten what we're doing up there. And also the other commands that we have, I'm going to just go them briefly by the communicating thing. This is what I had at first, assuming that you did not write all that command. Maybe some of you are saying that, no, it is too long, I will not be able to understand. What about in case you use a plot and you do a step-by-step part. So I'm going to go back and have my plot. You remember the plot I had earlier? So now, in case I want to distinguish the different species, I'm going to use an argument that is called the PCH. PCH is the plot character, okay? The plot character, which is the PCH, remember I'm still plotting the petal length versus the petal width. So what the plot character does, it converts the species column into numerical, into integer, and integers that are numerical. So what happens, since I've got 3 species, so I'm going to have the first one, the setosa, to be 23, okay? And then, so the plot structure, this one tells me that 23 implies diamonds. Let them appear in diamonds. 24 implies triangles that, the up triangles. And then the 25 implies that let the triangle face downwards. All these are within arguments in R. You might find that also some other time you can use your pH to be equal to 21, telling R that the plots that you give me, let them appear as circles. If you say pH equal to 22, let the observations or the plots I'm doing, let them be squares. But 23 implies diamonds, 20 implies the triangles that face upwards, and then 25, the triangles are going to face downwards. And remember, I've put this because unclass, I'm saying unclass the species column, such that now it doesn't appear, such that now where there is the setosa, it will be 23, where there is versicolor, it will be 24, where there is vajenka, it will be 25. And then I further go ahead and say that, you know what? I also put for me the other argument, which is the what? The title. So I'm running line 87. When I run that, you can still see now how my plot changes. This time around, they are not zeros, but now I can still be able to tell, like, okay, the diamonds, that is one type of species. We've got the triangles that face upwards, and then the triangles that face downwards. Maybe you can still move on, and they're like, okay, what? Let me put in color and see, such that they look even more clear. All right, I've already explained line 96 when I'm unclassifying the species. Now, I can say, okay, I want to have different colors for each. So this time around, I'm like, okay, I'm going to put everything, the plot character, the PCH, which is equal to what? Which is equal to 21. Remember the 21, these are filled circles. But I'm saying the BG, this one here, that fill these circles, the first one, the first species with red, the second with green, and then the third with what? With blue. So I'll run this line. When I run that line, this is what I'm getting. So my plot is coming out even more clear. So I'm able to tell, like, okay, the setosa, these are the red ones, which I'm having here. And then the versicolor, they're the green ones, and then the other ones, the vajenka, they are the blue ones. And if you want also to go ahead and put in the regression and so on, you can do all that just from what we had earlier. Okay, so also from there, now that at least we have a feel, what we are saying that at least at the back of our mind, that within multivariate analysis, we also need to understand how these variables are correlated to each other. All right, we've already seen in this particular case that there is a strong relationship between the petal length and the petal width in the different what? In the different species. We see it is stronger in the vajenka, which is moderate in the versicolor, and then yes, within the setosa, there is also a positive relationship, however small it is, but we are saying that an increase in the petal length also increases in the petal width. Okay, so how about in case now I want to have everything on one plot? I use the pairs command is now going to bring everything at a go, all the different correlation of the different variables when they are being colored by the species. So I run line 108. I'm hoping, okay, let me first pause. Are we on the same page? Okay, great. All right, let's continue. So I'm running line 108, and please, after the session, also find time to practice and even check and see how can you apply it to your own work, such that in case you have a question, then you can pose it during these sessions, and we'll be glad to support where we can. So I'm running line 109, and I'm using the pairs command. The pairs command is going to give me the scatter plot matrix, and with the bivariate part, with the univariate and all that. What about now when I'm considering everything at a go? So I'm saying that my argument, go inside the Irish data set, then consider columns from 1 to 4. Okay, remember from 1 to 4, that is where we are removing now the species column. I'm saying that give me labels, give me my title, label that title, the plot character 21. We said with this one, it implies that they are filled circles, okay? But these filled circles are going to have different colors. And then I run this particular line. All right, so I'm going to zoom out. So now with the pairs command, we want to see how different variables are correlated with each other. All right, so I'm going to zoom out. Okay. All right, this is what I want to show. Okay. You seeing my plots? All right, so now with this particular plot, remember the simple one we had, we are looking if there is a relationship between the petal length and the petal width. All right, and then interestingly, now that was for only the two variables. So that's why now what we are having is a scatter plot matrix. Okay, with this particular plot, you find that if you go back to our data set, the first column here, it takes the sepal length, the second takes the sepal width, the third takes the petal length, the fourth takes the petal width. Now, in terms of in column wise, the first it's in row wise, the first row takes the sepal length, the second row takes the sepal width, the third one takes the petal length, and then the fourth one takes the petal width. All right. Now, I want to listen to you. Now that from what we are seeing, what conclusions can we come up with? Okay. And then we discuss a little bit. Are you seeing that maybe when you're looking at these three species, when it comes to the length and then the width, the versicolized, you can easily see that it's more separated when it comes to this. Let me first hear from you, then I'll wrap up with the conclusion. Okay, any comments from what we have so far? Why do I have this error object? Now somebody's saying that why do I have error? Actually, you're just ahead of us. So it implies that you missed running the first argument. That's why you're getting that error, because you're talking about the panel Pearson. That command is going to help us to compute the correction coefficients automatically. Okay. Alpha is asking what is the meaning of the unclassified species in the argument. I mentioned that that argument, the unclassified, what I was doing, I was changing the species variable to converting the different labels to numerical or to integers. I'm unclassifying, the way you hear the word, that unclassify the species such that I'm able to use the plot argument to see that my observations come out very clearly. So Farage is saying there is a positive correlation is clearly seen right downside. Okay, so that is one comment. So for what about the rest? What are you seeing? I mean, there are many conclusions that we can come up with. Can you, as you're putting in the submission, you can also tell me between either it's a petal length or a petal width, etc. Okay, some of us joined late. Okay, for those that did not join late, can I hear from you? The length, there is correlation between green, blue, but setosa is isolated. That is wonderful. Okay, somebody's saying that. For example, if I consider the sepal length, I'm looking at now the third column. Okay, third column, and then I have the sepal length and then the petal length. These first two, they're saying that, well, I can see that when it comes to the petal length and the petal width, we see that the setosa are actually isolated. They are grouped together, and we can also see the same when it comes to versicolor and the virginica. So that is of the petal length and the petal width. We see that you can quickly see that the three species can quickly be separated from the other, which is not the same with the sepal length and the width, because it is the same for only the setosa, but we see an overlap of other species. Okay, we've already seen there is when it comes to the petal length and the width, there is a correlation, positive correlation within we are seeing a positive correlation for the petal length and then the petal width. So that is the reason as to why I told you that let's build slowly by slowly, such that at the end of the day, the result we get make a lot of meaning. So we can see a pattern in this particular part. In case we are going to look at, for example, the cluster in more details, we see that the species from when you look at the petal length for the, and then the sepal length, considering the species of setosa, we can easily see that they clustered in one corner. So in terms of length, we can tell that for it, in terms of values, we can tell that the values are smaller compared to the rest of the other values. All right, etc, etc. So most of the time, we pick the outstanding features that we can communicate. And then lastly, I want to, sorry, 7 minutes. Okay. Lastly, I want to talk about only this last code that gives us the correlation coefficients. Somebody was talking about the panel Pearson. So this one just gives us the correlation coefficients. And then either now we can easily tell there is a strong relationship, there is a moderate, or there is no correlation. I've put more notes that can support you to understand what the command does. So I'm going to run line 126 up to 130. And then after that, for me to see its effect, I'm going to run the pairs command again. And that is line 132. Okay, again, I'm going to zoom out and share with you what I have. You can also do it at your end. Okay, I stop. And then, where is the quote? Okay, so this is what I'm seeing. Remember initially, if we remember our plot here, where we are looking at petal length and petal width, since this is just a matrix, you know that the upper triangle, the results below the lower triangle, the lower and the upper triangles are equal. But what it's doing here, they're telling us that the correlation between petal length and petal width is 0.96. Okay, that is what we are having. And then if you look at this one, we have 0.82. We're also seeing a strong correlation between the sepal length and the petal width. So you can now, from the values that we have, you can also be able to see how these the different correlations or the relationship between the different parts of the species, and then also come up with the different correlations or patterns, and name it that whatever that you want to see. Okay. So that is at that particular point. Let me check if I can add something small. Okay. So with the scatter plot matrix, I'm going to stop there. Of course, within the visualization.R script, it has a lot of other plots that we can take. So, but for now, we are going to stop there, and I kindly ask you to revise. So we haven't done the power coordinates plot, but we can finish that maybe in 1 hour tomorrow, and my colleagues can take over. Over to you, Professor Susan or Thomas.
Thank you, Dr. Helen, for that insightful introductory multivariate analysis. It has been very educative. I hope also the participants have felt the same today, our day, and tomorrow we will do more work. So I hand over to Ruforum, just in case Dr. Runyararo is around, or any other Ruforum.
I'm around. Thank you so much, Professor Tumwebaze and team, and thank you everyone for attending this session. Let's meet again tomorrow, same time.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
The thing is painful. By the time you remove it,